2026 is around the corner, and if you really want to understand what's going on in the economy, you have to pay attention to the job market, what's going on with the economy, and what's happening with inflation, because the people that understand this will be able to find better investment opportunities and grow their wealth much faster, versus everybody else will not only fall behind with their investments, but also the job market and also their money, because our economy is changing, our money is changing, and our job market is changing, which is why in this video, I want to break down what's actually happening in our economy and how you can use these changes as an investment opportunity to grow and accelerate your wealth. So make sure you stick with me until the end of this video. Let's start with the top, the job market, because the job market has been getting hammered month after month after month, with fewer jobs being added into our economy, while companies are also ramping up their layoffs, partially because of artificial intelligence. Now, to really understand the job market, let's take a look at what's going on with unemployment numbers, because in 2023, we saw a reported unemployment number of 3.6% in the United States. In 2024, this number went up to 3.8%, and today, at the time I'm recording this video, we have 4.3% reported unemployment numbers. Now, the problem isn't this 4.3% unemployment, because historically this is a very low number. The problem is, where is unemployment going, and what is this employment number actually telling us? And this is where the data can get very confusing, because everybody has a different opinion on how to spin this data, but I'm hoping that this video will help clarify it. For example, according to the Trump administration, we're going to start seeing better job numbers come 2026. On the flip side, you have some members at the Federal Reserve Bank, our central bank here in the United States, saying the job market is weakening and you need to pay attention to this. The reality is nobody knows for sure what's going to happen in 2026 or 2027 or 2028. And your job is not to blindly follow what the news says or what the president says or what the Federal Reserve Bank says or what a random guy on YouTube says. Your job is to make your own financially educated opinion. That way you can make smarter decisions with their money. And the reason why the job market has become such a hot topic of discussion today isn't just because of rising layoffs. It's also because of artificial intelligence and how fast that's changing the job market, while most people are not keeping up. But I'll talk more about AI in the job market in just a little bit. But the thing that will ultimately tell us if the job market is going to grow or fall is not the government, it's not the Federal Reserve Bank, it is economic growth. So let's talk about that. Our economy is measured through a number called GDP. GDP is a measure of all spending that happens in our economy. So when you walk into Chipotle and you buy that bowl, you are contributing to the GDP. When you buy that bowl with the extra guac, you are contributing even more to the GDP. And when you buy the bowl with the extra guac and the tortillas on the side, because now they cost extra money and you finance it under Amex, you are contributing even more to GDP. Because not only are you spending at Chipotle, but you're also spending at Amex. In 2023, our GDP, our spending that happened in our economy was about $27.7 trillion. In 2024, our GDP grew to around $29.1 trillion. And in 2025, our GDP is expected to be around $30.5 trillion. Now, the thing that I want you to understand about this number that a lot of people forget, that the largest spender in our economy is not you and me, it's not Chipotle or Amazon or Nvidia, it's the United States government. So to really understand that the GDP versus government spending, we have to understand how much of this is government spending. So let's take a look. In 2023, the United States government spent around $6.2 trillion. Now, you might be wondering, Desperate, how did that actually get contributed to the economy? Well, the United States government spends their money in a lot of ways. How? They spend money on the military and defense. They spend money on infrastructure. They spend money in healthcare and all of the other expenses. When the United States government spends a dollar, it goes into the hands of somebody's pocket, and that is then contributed into the GDP because that is somebody's salary. Just like when you go to Chipotle and you buy the bowl, that is paying for somebody's salary. In 2024, government spending went up to $6.8 trillion, and in 2025, it is expected that government spending is going to reach around $7.1 trillion. Now, all of this sounds great, but remember, the United States government is not a for-profit entity. It's not Chipotle that's producing Chipotle bowls to sell them for a profit. The United States government has one source of revenue, and that is tax dollars from taxpayers. And the problem is the government is spending $6 to $7 trillion. I mean, $7 trillion in 2025. But the problem is the United States government is not going to generate $7.1 trillion in taxes in 2025. And that means the government is spending money that they don't have, which means they are financing some of the spending through their Amex. or in the government's eyes, it is our national debt, which is over $37 trillion right now. Now, if you're a weirdo like me, this is where things start to get really interesting, because you're going to say if the government can contribute to our economy, more economic growth could mean better jobs. So can't the United States government just go out and spend more money and create more jobs? Which, yes, they can, but there's a consequence to that. And the consequence is, well, hold your thought, because the United States government can borrow their money from a few different entities. They can borrow money from people like you and me when you lend money to the United States government in exchange for interest. They can borrow money from foreign countries like Japan and the United Kingdom and Canada. But the problem is there's not enough money out there to lend to the United States government. There's not enough demand to lend money to the United States government. And so that's when the United States government goes out and borrows money from our central bank, who is called the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, the interesting thing about the Federal Reserve Bank is that they're not a bank, because you and I can't go there to deposit money. They're not a reserve because they're not actually sitting on any cash reserves, and they're not federal. It says so on the website. They're not a part of the federal government, but they have the ability to print money out of thin air and lend it to the United States government. So if the United States government spends a couple $1 trillion that they don't have, the Federal Reserve Bank can print that money and lend it to the United States government. Then the government can spend that money, which boosts the GDP, which can help unemployment. But there's a consequence to all that. And the consequence is none other than inflation, which brings us to the third topic that I want to talk about, which is inflation. In 2023, the reported inflation rate in the United States was 3.4%, which means, according to the reported numbers, the average price of things in the United States grew by 3.4%. In 2024, the reported inflation rate fell to 2.9%. And at the time we record in this video, the reported inflation rate in America is 2.9%. Now, the reason why I say reported inflation rate is because the real inflation rate that many people feel is oftentimes higher than this number. Because while the reported inflation rate factors in many different things that happen in our economy, and sometimes the inflation rate that you feel with your rent or with your groceries or with your car prices or with your gas is higher than these numbers. So the rule of thumb that a lot of people like to say is that the real inflation rate for many people is 2 times the reported inflation rate. So if it's 2.9%, is actually closer to 5.8%, your real inflation rate. But that's beside the point of this video. What I'm trying to get you to understand here is what this reported inflation rate means is not that the prices of things have fallen from 2023 to 2025. It means that the prices of things are still rising. It's just not rising as fast as it was before. But this is where there's some concerns about inflation. And those concerns about inflation are, number one, tariffs, because some people are still concerned that the tariffs that we're seeing in 2025 are going to contribute to higher prices in 2026. We'll ultimately see what happens with that. But the second concern with inflation has to do with interest rates, because the Federal Reserve Bank began cutting interest rates in 2025, and there's talks about the Federal Reserve Bank cutting interest rates even more later in 2025 and again into 2026. Now, the reason why people are concerned about the contributing to inflation is because if interest rates go down, people might start borrowing more money. That's the whole purpose of cutting interest rates. Now, let's play through this scenario. Let's assume that now you can get a cheaper car loan rate, you can get a cheaper mortgage rate, but mortgage rates fell to, let's just say, 5%. If this was to happen, chances are you would see more buyers, more demand. And if there's more buyers for houses, that could lead to more bidding wars on houses. Because now if you have 5 people that want the same house, people start to bid against each other for that same house, and that could start pushing home prices up. And if that were to happen, well, then now you start to see how that could contribute to the inflation problem. So there's concerns that lower interest rates are going to then reignite inflation. And if you couple that with concerns about tariffs, you can start to see why people are concerned. We don't know what's going to happen for sure, but people are concerned about this inflation problem come 2026. Now, here's the economics lesson that we all should have learned in school before we graduated. What we want is a strong job market. We want people to earn more money and to see people have jobs, right? But in order for that to happen, we need to see a strong economy. And what we've kind of become used to in this economy is that the economy has been supplemented by the support of the United States government because of all this government spending that we're seeing and the growth not just of government spending, but also of deficit spending. That means the United States government spending money that they don't have to then stimulate the economy, to make the economy numbers look good, to then stimulate the job market. But what we're seeing today is that the consequence of all that is inflation. Because this inflation wasn't a problem before the year 2020, that doesn't mean that inflation didn't exist. fact, we're still talking about 2 to 3% inflation, and most people have no idea how it impacts their money. But the reality is not just the inflation that you have to pay attention to, but how these three factors tied together to really impact the economy. Because while they're three separate things, they all tie into one another. And the problem is we've been reliant on government spending to stimulate the economy, to stimulate the job market, but now that's making the inflation problem worse. And this is where, in order to actually let the economy grow and to see more stronger jobs, or stronger job growth in the private markets, we have to let the economy then reset without just more government spending. But that's not easy, because if the government were to just pull back on some of their spending, well, then you have job losses, because that means the government is not paying for those people's salaries. When you start hearing about government layoffs, that's what that means. And this is where it's a very tough problem, because on one hand, if the government were to cut spending, that's going to hurt the economy, that's going to hurt jobs. But if the government were to raise taxes, that way they don't have to print as much money. Well, the raising of taxes is also not going to be received well by many people. The raising of taxes could also impact the job market. If people now have higher expenses, they have less spending ability, less money going into the economy. So it's a double-edged sword, and not to mention the fact that if the United States government stopped their deficit spending in 2025, we would see a recession 50% larger than what we saw in 2008. And then we have one more factor, which is very new, which is changing the landscape of all of these things, which is none other than artificial intelligence. I said I'd talk about this a little bit later, but AI is changing our economy faster than we've seen happen in any time in history, because it is revolutionizing not just the job market, but also the economy, and it can impact inflation. And the reason why is because AI is changing the way that people can do business. Most people use AI just to make better emails or to find guacamole recipes, but the reality is AI is changing the job market. I mean, we use AI in really every single part of our business, and what I learned, this was a real wake-up call for me a few months ago. What I learned is if my company, Briefs Media, was going to continue doing what we did, we were going to be bankrupt by the year 2035. That scared me. Then I started doing some more digging, and I realized, oh, we're not going to be bankrupt in 2035. We're going to be bankrupt in 2030. So we made a big pivot in our company. We're changing the way that we do our business. We're rebranding to Briefs Finance. I'm going to release all this in 2026, but the reason why I'm telling you this is AI is changing our economy, is changing businesses faster than ever. Some people are trying to get ahead of it. Many people are not going to. I'm telling you this because I'm going through it myself, but it is changing the economy. And because of how fast it's changing, a lot of people can't keep up, and it's changing the job market. You might not be replaced by AI in the next 5 years, but there's a very high probability that your company might replace you with somebody that understands AI better than you. That's how fast it's growing. Our economy has so much money flowing into AI. Hundreds of billions of dollars, I mean countless dollars are flowing into AI because, number one, the company that can dominate the AI race is going to control the economy. And number two, the country that figures out the AI race is going to then be the leader of the next generation of time because of how fast AI is evolving. That's why you're seeing so much money, not just from private companies and from investment institutions, but now also governments that are pouring money into this AI investment because every single company and every single country around the world is trying to be the leader when it comes to AI development. So my advice to you is to understand this and get ahead of it and learn how to use it instead of falling behind on it. And the reason why it can also impact inflation is because of how fast it is changing the economy and democratizing access to information and accessing research, which can bring the prices of many things down. For example, we were thinking about developing an app many years ago, and the cost to develop the app was about $250,000 years ago, before AI was as smart as it is today. Today, that same app is going to cost roughly $25,000 to $50,000 to develop because of AI, because it has reduced the cost to do that, because it has reduced the cost of labor for so many different industries. So I want you to understand this because this is a trend that is not going to slow down. Sure, we might see an AI bubble that could burst, but AI is not going to go away. You need to understand what's happening here. So what does this mean for you, and how can you find the opportunity? This is where I want you to understand BIC. And what I mean by that is there are three entities in the economic system. There are consumers, there are the business owners, and there are the investors. And the way that it works is you as a consumer, every single one of us are consumers because we all need money to eat. You go to Chipotle, the business, and you spend money. When you go and spend money at the business, who is the one that's benefiting? It's not the employees at Chipotle. I mean, yeah, you get a salary, but what we've seen throughout history, not just the last 5 years, but the last number of decades, is that wages haven't kept up with inflation. The real winner are the investors. It is the owners. So when you go and spend money at Chipotle, the real winner are the owners of Chipotle. It is the investors. That's what the I is. The consumers are spending money at businesses, and the investors are the ones that get rich. This economic system that we live in is designed to make investors rich. So learn to be an investor. That's the person that's going to continue to become wealthy no matter what happens here. And you want to know what? This inflation that we're seeing is not going to go away. We know that inflation happens. This inflation benefits one person, and the person that it benefits is none other than the investor. You want to see why? Because what inflation means is you have to spend more money when you want to buy that Chipotle. You've seen guac prices go up. We've seen bowl prices go up. And I don't mean to pick on Chipotle, but you get the idea here. You as a consumer now have to spend more dollars at the business to get that same product. Well, as you spend more dollars at the business, some of those dollars go to the hands of the employees, but we know that most of those dollars go to the hands of the investors. So who gets rich? It is the investor. This is what we should have all learned before we graduated high school or college. But if you want to build wealth in this economic system where things are changing, it is more important than ever for you to understand this and start investing in money. I'm not saying we're not going to see a market crash. I'm not saying we're not going to see a recession. In fact, we will. A part of our economic system is going to happen again. But the people that are going to build wealth over the long term are the ones that are investors. Because that old game of just saving a little bit of money and hoping that you can retire with Social Security and a pension, it is gone. And it is going to accelerate more away from that even faster because of AI and because of the changes that we're seeing. And that's why I want you to become more financially educated and understand this. That way you can be on the winning side. Now, if you don't know how to start investing, spend some time, spend some money now learning how to invest. That way you can build your education, not just as a consumer, but as an investor. That way you can build wealth in this economic system because things are changing and are changing faster than ever.